And are we live? I believe I have input. Say hello, Janice.
Hello, Rob!
Yay, you're there.
Yay! Yay, we can start!
I have waves. So, I am talking to Janice Landry. Writer, director, producer, instructor, a veteran journalist, and an old friend who's written a new book. And I really want to get into some serious topics about your book is some very serious and emotional stuff, because I believe, Janice, that you are the daughter who loves her dad the most. You win the contest.
It's not a contest in any way, but I definitely do love my dad. His name was Baz Landry, and he was a veteran firefighter in Halifax for 31 years and my biggest supporter. So, Rob, when we knew each other going to King's and studying journalism, anything I have done up to and including that time and certainly past, I really owe a lot of it to my dad, who taught me the value of good work ethic and sort of having a dream and following it. So when I grew up, I always had a sense that I could achieve something, and it was because of really dad and my mom too, but my family. I grew up in that environment where, it was okay to dream big. And so the reason that I've done this book is because I owe it really to him.
And you wound up on TV. I remember when we were in journalism school, you got on CBC Radio. You got an internship early on.
Yeah, I started at CBC Radio, actually.
What was your first job there? Because I actually went for that job too.
You did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, there were
Sorry,
three.
man.
No, there were three of us, and they went for the pretty one.
I've got some lipstick on for you today. I never go anywhere without the lipstick. I actually started at CBC Radio doing traffic reporting and script writing.
That's
and I
right.
did for the two main shows, so the morning show, Information Morning, and then their afternoon show at Main Street. And the reason this was so wonderful was because I really got a sense of how things operated from behind the scenes for several years. I did this shift, sort of split shift. I'd go down to Information Morning early in the morning, do my thing, and walk up to King's, and then come back down in the afternoon. And at the time, I thought, this is a crazy schedule, like going to school and doing all this stuff. But what I learned from the people at CBC Radio was so invaluable, and got to meet some of the biggest names really in Canadian radio there, Don Tremaine and all these wonderful people who really treated me with great respect, even though I was low man on the totem pole.
I learned a lot from that job interview, actually, because I went in and the guy asked, "What are you studying?" And I said, "Well, I've got a major in journalism and a minor in philosophy." And he proceeded to ask me a bunch of questions about philosophy, and I kind of went, "I don't know, man. I'm just,
I really did love it there. And afterwards, I remember doing a project, and Don Tremaine is retired now. He was so gracious, and he came back in the studio and he helped me out on the school project. And I couldn't say enough about it. But it's so funny, because I was just telling you about the lipstick thing. Well, even when I would go into Information Morning at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, I would, even though it was radio and you couldn't see me, I would still have the lipstick on. So anybody who knows me well knows I love my lipstick. So I did put it on for your podcast today.
I appreciate that. Most people who do radio are they're dressed in sweats or they have no pants on, like me today. So
that is a visual. I love it, because when you write, and we're going to talk about writing today, I love that I can come down and my daughter goes off to school and I can make my pot of tea. I'm a big tea drinker, and sit there in my pajamas. And there are many days where I get so focused in on what I'm writing that the whole day will go by and I'm still sitting there with my hair sideways in my pajamas, because you lose yourself in the writing.
Yeah, I was just talking about that last night. I did a reading at a London Public Library last night, and we started off this thing with why we write. And I said, well, if my dad were here, he'd say, if you don't do it for the money, then don't do anything. You got to do it for the money. If you don't have money, then you may as well just keep bees, because at least if you have bees, then you have honey, which is kind of charming, except when he says bees, he means birds, and when he says honey, he means honey.
you
Because
know what? I think you yeah, you have to be employed and you have to, feed your children and yourself, but I'll say this, and I don't know if you agree or not. I mean, I don't think that when you write for money. I know I didn't write. There's anyone who knows me well. Yeah, I want people to buy my book. Of course, I would be lying to you and people would think I was lying. Of course, I'd love if people bought it. But the main reason I wrote it is because I want people to know my father's story. And his story is historical and it's significant. And there are many firsts in there that people didn't know about. So when I Googled my dad's name, nothing came up. And that bothered me. And I thought, you know what, if I can do this so that now people, even every time someone reads this book, they know this story and pass it on and so on and so forth. So for me, that was a really big driving factor was honestly not the money. Because you know yourself, when you put years into work, research and writing and interview people, you can't possibly get back the money that you've invested in that.
our mentor was one of our mentors was Walter Stewart, and I remember Walter, who was the author of many books. He's passed now. He said, no matter what you do as an author, it takes so much time that you get paid pennies an hour.
That's true.
And my answer to the question is to follow up, because that was my Jason Statham impression was actually what my dad would say. What I would say is that I'm in the brain tickle business, and when I say that, excuse me, when I don't have a cough button, when I say that, people think that I'm talking about tickling their brains. I'm actually talking about tickling mine. I have an addictive personality, and I am addicted to the dopamine drip and that floaty feeling that you get when you put words together in new patterns and make new neural connections.
That's actually a really interesting thought. And I'll tell you, I can see what you're saying because at first, when I attempted to do this piece, first, I wasn't ready to do it for many years. And a couple things in terms of that feeling of sort of that addictive feeling is that at first I had a great fear about the project, Rob, which I really haven't talked to a lot of people about because it is my father and many of his late friends and peers, a group of people and first responders who mean so much to the community. This is a very big piece of responsibility weighing on my shoulders to get their stories right. Secondly, I've written another book before, but it wasn't for wide distribution. It was for a specific person who hired me to do it for him and his community. So it wasn't like I hadn't written a big piece before, but I think I was really fearful. And I went to see another friend of mine who's an author, and his name is Bill Jessam, and he's very well known in Atlantic, Canada. He does a lot of ghost stories and that sort of thing.
I know the name,
and,
yeah.
He's in his 80s now, and so I was over having coffee with Bill one day, and I was telling him about this book, and he knew all about it, and he's like, Janice, what are you waiting for? And he's like, what's stopping you? And at first, what was stopping me was my grief, because I had lost my father and I wasn't ready. After a time passed, I knew I was, and then I still wasn't starting. So when Bill said that to me, I went home and I thought about it, and I went, you know what? The only thing that was stopping me is fear. And people might say, well, what kind of fear did you have? Well, I told you about the responsibility. You're right. It's a very serious book with a lot of people in it. And so I know their family members and friends and colleagues will all be looking carefully at that. But I think it's just fear of failure. And I think a lot of people who write or create anything artistic face that fear. And you have to have something or people or something that helps you move through that in order to be able to achieve really anything.
Well, I think I would guess that part of your fear is to do justice to the story. The book is the 60-second story. Can you explain the title to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. On the cover, which I actually have here, and I don't know if it'll play well or not, but I will put it up to the screen. You can see that's my dad there and the child he rescued. The name of the 60-second story, I wasn't sure what I was going to name the book for a long time till I started researching. And, I didn't really know the real specific details of the case. Of course, I was aware of what Dad did because he got a medal, and we all knew that. But I didn't know till after really months of research and talking with all these firefighters and going through all these historical documents that it was literally 60 seconds in the difference between my father and the child he rescued in the bedroom living and dying. So it occurred to me that in first responders, in their world, 60 seconds is a lifetime. It's a huge difference. And so in the book, you will see that there are many references to time and other examples where 60 seconds or less makes the difference between life and death.
And what year was the rescue?
1978. And again, tactically, as a journalist, you'll understand this. In part of my strategy was knowing that, when I started the work back in early January 2012, I knew this year was the 35th anniversary. So, we look for hooks in journalism, and so I knew I had that anniversary coming up. So I really started my work in January of 2012. The idea had been formulating for years, but I actually started the first interview that in January 2012, knowing tactically I wanted the book to come out this year.
Well, your dad, 1978. So you said something in an interview that really caught my attention. You said that when he rescued this baby, and how old was the baby?
8 weeks old.
8 weeks old. Okay. So trapped in a burning structure.
Yes.
And you said in this other interview that the rescue was nearly physically impossible.
That's right.
How is
Do you want
that?
me to explain it?
Yeah, please.
So, let me just. I'm going to try to bring you another picture. I know that this isn't. It's hard to see, but can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. This is the actual rear of the house that my father did the rescue on, and you'll see right here. There's a trellis. So he had to come in and climb up this trellis onto this porch roof.
Okay.
He had no breathing apparatus on, and then he had to jump up onto the gutter system.
Right.
So he jumped up onto the gutter system, and hanging onto the gutter with one arm, he hit the window and smashed it, and then he had to swing up and into the window.
Wow.
So a lot of the firefighters I talked to explained that it had to have been a person of slight build to do this, because a heavier man, my dad was always very slight, and so a heavier fireman would have ripped the gutter system right off the house. So the fact that Dad was able to get up there without the breathing apparatus, hang there with one hand, smash the window out with his helmet, and then swing himself up and through the broken glass into the room, you have to have good upper body strength for that. And Dad was always very fit and lean. And then when he got into the room, Dad and I only talked about this once, Robbie, only talked about what this was like inside the room once with me as an adult. It wasn't an interview per se. It was me talking with my dad privately. And I chose to share that conversation because, his perspective was so important. But when he plopped into the room, and you'll read all in many details about what happened, it was so dark in the child's bedroom that Dad literally could not see the hand in front of his face.
Mm-hmm.
So this was very difficult for me to learn about. I mean, emotionally, after talking with Dad and then all the other corroborative evidence I have, I had to relive. Now, I mean, Dad's passed away, and that's already tough enough. But you've spent 2 years of your life researching and writing about the fact that he almost died and I was 13 at the time. So your dad almost died over and over and over again. So the writing of this work was very taxing and draining, and there were many times when, as I told you, sitting in my pajamas, that I would break down. That I literally would have to get up and walk away from my computer, take a deep breath, and come back and work again. And it's just a gift that I know all of what I do know. I can relive for you that whole day of multi-perspectives of exactly who was doing what where. And I didn't know that before. So regardless of whether one book sells, I know my dad's story inside and out. And to me, that's an achievement and a success anyway.
Your mom's still around?
She is. My mother's name is Teresa, and she's 80. And last week I held the official book launch for the book at my home where my dad loved, and we had about 50 or 60 invited guests. And my mom was there, and I made a speech in front of everyone and recognized members of my family. And the first person I recognized was Baz's wife, Teresa, and she was so moved. And I just think to be able to share this with her at this stage of her life about her late husband, it's just wondrous.
I'm curious about the psychology of the first responder because I wondered, did she know all the details?
No, and in fact, I think this was a bit shocking to her because she would keep saying over and over to me, he never told me. He never talked about it. And in fact, I've done 21 interviews for the book. The biggest majority of the first responders I spoke to say the same thing, that they don't actually talk about it too much. They may talk about it amongst themselves when they go back to the fire station or wherever and decompress and have their meal or whatever they're doing. But when they come home, for the people I spoke to, a lot of them just don't talk about it.
That seems to go, it's pretty intense, a pretty intense experience, obviously. It seems to go beyond just mere humility. That makes you wonder, was that PTSD? Like, that's the same experience veterans have.
It's exactly the same experience that anybody who's a frontline worker has. And in fact, I was talking with someone today. I was out doing some errands and I ran into a former police officer who I know. And he said the same thing to me. I would come home to my family, and at the time he had small children, and I, had witnessed something horrific at work. And, years later, perhaps my wife would overhear me talking to someone and she'd say, well, you never told me that.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, no. And I stopped and thought about this and I thought, well, why would my dad come home and offload this all onto me or my mother? And I really truly feel, and I can only speak for myself and my own family, I can't, summarize what everybody else is thinking, but I do feel like they're almost protecting their family from what they've witnessed. Why would they want to burden you with some of these very horrific things that they've had to deal with? And I know for a fact, one Christmas, my dad was involved with battling a fire where a child died. And I didn't know this till later. And Mom told me that they had to actually move Christmas to another day because it was just not the right time to celebrate given what he had witnessed. I didn't know, I was a kid. So it didn't matter, and that's the whole point. We still had Christmas. But, the fact is that this is something these people do day in and day out over years. So that is really, you're hitting the crux now of why I wanted to do the book. Of course I want to recognize my dad, but the bigger thing here is it's an homage to these people who do this so selflessly. Well, as we speak, they're out there doing it.
Mm. Well, it's obviously a really powerful story, and I know you've been doing book launches. Have you heard from the firefighters who your dad worked with?
Yeah, it's so nice. You do ask very good questions, Rob. I have heard from them, and they're pleased, and so that makes me happy because I had sort of this knot in my stomach waiting to hear from some of them, and I've received phone calls and emails, and they're just like basically summarizing, saying your dad would be so proud and thank you so much for shining a spotlight on first responders and how much they appreciate this. The biggest thing that's happened to me so far that I just really had no clue that was going to happen is the current fire chief here in Halifax. And keep in mind, Halifax has the oldest fire service in Canada on record. So the current fire chief, Chief Trussler, sent a memo out internally to every staff member in Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency praising the book and saying, no, this is out there. Know that it's shining a good light on what we do. And so to have that endorsement from the chief of the actual fire service that you're discussing is the biggest honor of all. And I'll tell you, my dad was so super humble that he would be blown away by that. He really would. And so am I.
Well, it's not just the first responders' response. I'm very curious to hear what the baby says, because the baby was just 8 weeks old. The baby's rescued. I assume he didn't have any gear. Your dad didn't have any gear. So did he have smoke inhalation after this?
Well, it's really interesting that you asked that question. I've interviewed, I've reunited with the whole family, and of course, how that happened is in the book, and it was no easy feat. So I spoke with the mother, and her name is Kim Gibson, and her sister, and the grandmother, and her name is Shirley Mackenzie, and it was at Shirley's house that the fire happened. So there was absolutely no problem with this child after this fire. The mother said he had a little bit of trouble taking his food afterward. They had to clean some soot out of his nose, and that's it. And really, when you read from the firefighters what the inside of the house looked like the next day, it's just amazing to me that the child had no long-term health problems whatsoever. And I've met with him, and there's photographs of him and his family in the book. And he's just a young, strapping guy. He's 35 years old, and you'd never know. And of course, he grew up hearing these stories. He was too young to remember. He was just an infant, but he grew up knowing that this happened to him. So our reunion, for me personally, Rob, and I've done hundreds of interviews in my career. I've been a journalist for 26 years. And honest to God, I would tell you that this was probably the most impactful interview I've ever done, because I had played it out in my mind over and over again. What's he going to look like? What's he going to sound like? Is he going to talk to me? And I really didn't think the interview was going to happen, because he's quite shy. And I mean, he doesn't owe me anything. This is obviously a very emotional things for the family to talk about. But they were very, very welcoming and receptive, and I cannot thank them enough. I do feel like it's their way of trying to say thank you to Dad. They've all said that, we can't thank your father enough. And I do feel that them speaking with me is yet another way of them trying to say thank you for this incredibly close call. But the man in question who Dad rescued, Nick Mackenzie, was just so gracious. That I will never be able to say thank you to him enough for granting me that reunion and interview.
Well, how did the fire start in the first place?
I don't know, because I have so many documents and reports. All we know is I'll tell you sort of what led up to it. The family was having hamburgers, and they were one of them was frying the hamburgers in a pan in the kitchen, and the rest of them were sort of in the living room or whatever. And they heard, the one in the kitchen heard this like crackling noise, but they didn't have a fireplace or anything, and there were no candles lit. So she came out, and she went through the living room and looked at the stairwell that went upstairs to the second floor where the bedrooms are. And there were just great plumes of black smoke and flame coming down the stairs. So they all tried to get up. Many people in the family tried to get up the stairwell, including the late father, who worked as a firefighter himself, and they couldn't get up. They kept being forced back, and some of them were injured trying to get to the child. By this time, they had called the fire department. So we know they were having dinner. The problem is that the fire investigator, and I have his preliminary report, has passed away. So I can't interview him, and I cannot find the conclusive report. So you'll see in the book the initial report about, how much damage and who was there and the type of, all the other information is there. The cause is not.
And what happened to the Mackenzie family after they lost their home?
Well, the mother in question, Kim Gibson, who had the infant, went and lived with another family member, and the house was rebuilt. They don't live there now. There's another family who does. And there's a very significant part of the book where, for the first time in my life, I actually went to that location. I had never gone to see it before. I had finished one day interviewing a firefighter who was present that day, and I found his interview very moving. His name's Joe Young, and you'll see his interview in the story. He plays a significant role. He was the firefighter who drove my father to the scene that day, as my father was an officer. So in the meantime, I'm sorry, Rob, what was your question again? What were we just talking about?
We were talking about what happened with the Mackenzie family.
Right. So the next day afterwards, Dad came back to the scene because the fire investigators were all there and the family was there, and they were still hysterical. They were still very upset because it was such a close call. And there's one of the people, the grandmother at whose home the fire occurred, spoke at length with my father that day, and he kept reassuring her that Shirley, he said, you also helped save the child. And she's like, well, what do you mean, Basil? And what had happened was the child was wrapped in a heavy, thick blanket and was upstairs sleeping. But typically, the child wasn't covered with a blanket, and she also shut the door partially. Normally, the door was left open, but he was not, he was sort of being naughty and crying. So because Shirley had partially shut the door and wrapped him in this thick blanket, the blanket being over him covered him from the smoke, and the door, as you know, as soon as you open doors in a fire, it feeds in more oxygen, right? So the fire spreads more quickly. So the fact that the grandmother had done these two things helped in the end too. And I think that Dad going back the next day and meeting with the family really helped her, because he was able to reassure her that everything is okay, and in fact, you were part of why it's okay.
Great. And you've had quite a launch. I keep seeing you do a really cool thing with all your book launches. I noticed that your or book readings or signings, you're getting pictures of with people who buy the book, which is,
I do.
that's a really smart and friendly thing to do, and it ends up on Facebook, and the word spreads.
Well, I'll tell you why. I really like people. And then you might think that it's not really tactical. It's just I'm so bloody thrilled they buy the book that every time whoever comes to my book, I'm doing two signings tomorrow, whoever the first person is at each signing, that's who I take the picture of. So
Nice.
it's the first person from whatever location, and really it's just such a variety of people that it's wonderful. And I'm so honored that they would think enough of me, or they find the subject interesting, and Dad would be so thrilled too. So for me, going back to what I said earlier, every single time somebody reads that story, somebody knows about my dad.
Nice. Well, the book is 60-second story, and it's available in bookstores everywhere. Is it also an ebook?
I don't. I just actually sent that message to my publisher at Pottersfield Press. I don't know. People are asking. I can tell you this. Chapters is carrying it. Coles is carrying it. You can get it on Amazon.ca. You can get it at Nimbus, Nimbus.ca, and Pottersfieldpress.ca. So it's like it's definitely out there big time. I don't know about the e-readers yet. I certainly hope so. And in fact, I was on Twitter talking to a guy yesterday who's like, Janice, do you have this on reserve? Is this in the library, the Halifax library system? And I said, well, Barry, I don't know. And he's like, well, I'm going to ask them. So this follower I have on Twitter asked the Halifax library system, who has the book, and then he tweeted me this morning to say the book has already been on hold for like 12 people. So this one person on Twitter, whom I don't even know, who I feel like I know now, has helped me to get the book in the library where people who may not be able to afford it can still read the story. And that's the most important thing.
So this book has been in process since 1978, but how long did it take you to write it?
It's a 2-year labor of love. I started the research in January of 2012, and of course, it's now getting close to next year. So yeah, it's about a 2-year process. It definitely has been in the works in my head for many years. I just, as I told you, was a little fearful and a little just too sad to tackle it, and I couldn't be more happy today that people like you would be kind enough to talk to me about it.
It's just you. We talked a little bit about the time management thing. I think for most writers, the writing is one component of their problem and process, but time management is another, because you write, produce, you are a director, you do voiceover work. I didn't know about that.
I'll tell you what, my dream is, if anybody's watching this podcast, I've always dreamt of doing voiceover work for an animated film. I love animation. I have since I was a kid. Bugs Bunny is one of my favorites of all time. They were, Mel Blanc was a god as far as I'm concerned. When Mel Blanc died, I was so sad. Who of course was the voice characterization of all of the Looney Tunes characters. A lot of people don't know that it was one guy.
Yeah.
I would love to do it. So if there's somebody out there that needs somebody to do a character, I would like to be that person.
Well, it's funny. I've had Chris Richardson on the podcast. He's a documentary film director, and with all that you do, it's funny to have gone to journalism school with a couple of people who, at the end, I think I should have gone to film school. I wanted to go to film school. How did I end up in journalism school? It was 2 hours away from home. That's what happened.
It's funny you should mention Chris, because I was just speaking with him on Facebook, and I told him that we were going to be doing this. He goes, "Oh, you're going to be one of the cool people too." Podcast. And yes, Chris is. We're very lucky, Rob, because when we went to school at King's, a lot of people in our class, we graduated with some uber talented people. And as you know, Chris's latest documentary, which is called Regret, actually stems from an incident that happened at King's back in our day. I don't want to spoil it. I would really urge your viewers and listeners to look for Regret. It's a beautiful piece of documentary work, and Chris, it's very personal. Again, like my story is, it does have something to do with something that happened in his life that he held a regret over, and you're well aware about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, really, when we talk about regrets, we all have them. But I will tell you this book for me is not one of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, you instruct. Where do you instruct?
I teach at Mount St. Vincent University here in Halifax.
And what do you do there?
I teach in the Department of Communication Studies. So even though my background is as a journalist, and it's so funny when I come into my teach with my students, a lot of them are going to be in marketing or communications or public relations, and I tell them, wait, you have to know that your teacher's a journalist, woo, the dark side, and they get a big charge out of it. But I do a lot of strategy and things like that.
Wait a minute. When we were journalists, that's what we said about them.
We called them that too, and I'm really upfront and honest about them. So
we called them flax.
You have to learn to sort of have that relationship where you work with one another. But I've been there for 12 years, and I teach like media relations, and I do public speaking, and I do a great AV course where we do still photography, and we do podcasts and PSAs, and we do videos and stuff like that. So I've really used all the different storytelling mediums that I use in my day-to-day career. I teach them. So it's just an absolute, I love it. I absolutely love being around my students. I learn from them, which is just the greatest gift about teaching.
Let's go back in time for a moment. Where did you start your television internship when you were in journalism school? Was it at ATV?
Yeah, I actually did. At the time, CTV Atlantic was called ATV, and I did actually do my what we call co-op or work term placement at ATV, and I did that for a period of, I don't forget how many months we did it for, but at the time, at the end of it, what happened was there was one job that came open, a full-time job there, and I applied for it with two other people. And the three of us competed for the job, and I was lucky enough to get it. So coming right out of King's, and I mean, you're as green as the grass, and I look back at pictures of myself, and it's like, oh my God, I look like I was 12 years old. Still do, right? I worked at CTV, really in every role there. I started as a junior reporter and worked my way up to, I have my own show where I anchored an hour-long newscast on the weekends with a man by the name of Jonathan Gravener, and we had a weekend show for almost 4 years. So I did line-up editor, all of it, and I worked there for 12 years. And really, they've been great with me with the book launch. I've been at CTV twice now for interviews, and have made lifelong friends there. And it's just fantastic. I learned so much. And then it was time for me to leave after my daughter was born. I wanted more control over my time, and really wanted to branch out and try other things as a journalist, like writing and teaching and doing large video projects that I do. So they gave me a great grounding and foundation for what I do now, and I'm very grateful to all the staff there, because really the veterans that worked there many people mentored me and helped me refine what I do, and I don't forget that. So that today, if there's someone younger who needs a letter of recommendation or some help with something, I try to do that because so many people did it for me.
You got so much more out of your television internship than I did. I remember it being 2 weeks working at ATV, trying to stay out of Steve Murphy's way, and there was some other guy who was angry to be there. Not Steve Murphy. There was another guy who worked on the weekend who'd lost his desk. So when he came in, it's like, oh, stay away from that desk because that guy lost his office and now he's really mad. And what I remember is spending the entire 2 weeks trying to look busy and
Funny. Oh my gosh.
and I hid out in a video editing suite from time to time. And I remember bonding with the sports guy because I watched. I
Was it
remember
Paul Meunier? Do you remember if it was Paul Meunier who was the sports guy at
it
the time?
was, yes, super
I,
nice guy.
he's so nice, and I've stayed in contact with Paul. He still comes to visit in Halifax. He's not living here now, but people love him. And I have to tell you this: I used to fill in on Live at Five when if Nancy Reagan back in the day was off, and I worked alongside Paul Meunier. And I will say this: Paul is one of the best live ad-libbers I've ever seen.
Mm.
And when you do live television, it's its own monster, right? I mean, you really have one shot and there's a lot of people watching. And it was really, I credit him because he's so good at it. And I really liked him as a person that he is the person that really helped me get comfortable speaking live to people. And I don't even know if he knows that, but I had so much fun and learned so much from him that I still use some of these things today. But the thing about Paul is that he's real and
Mm-hmm.
authentic, right? There's no fake BS or whatever. You see what you see. And he's that way off camera too. He's just, you could go to the pub and have a beer with the guy, right? People love him. And he was like that on camera and off camera. And I really want to say a shout out and a thank you to him because I really did learn a lot from him.
Actually, he probably gave me the peak of my experience during that awful, awful internship, because I remember we watched Mike Tyson fight in slow motion. We had we were editing the feeds, and I knew much more about boxing than I did about editing, so I just watched. But I fed him a line to use on air, and he used it, and I was like, oh, I contributed maybe 7 seconds to that podcast. To that broadcast.
What I told you, Rob, was that people like your words,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
really, it's interesting that you bring that up because words are sort of second nature to you. And I mean, I'll give you a shout out. I mean, I see you online all the time, and your tweets or posts exhaust me because I'm thinking, how is this guy churning this stuff out all the time? And I mean, I know what it took me, but you just don't ever seem to stop.
Yeah, I can't shut up. Actually, I kind of ripped my throat out. My throat was so sore the last couple of days, and I said I took a vow of silence day before yesterday, just to give my vocal cords a rest because I had this sore throat, and I realized that when I take a vow of silence, the house is really, really quiet. It was a terrible realization.
Yeah, I don't know if I could take that vow because anybody who knows me knows I don't stay quiet for too long.
Well, I want to touch on something because I'm kind of nostalgic for Kings now. This is not the first time you and I have been on a radio podcast. I use the air quotes radio.
That's right.
Do you,
When we were in school, we had to do all this stuff in lab work, right? So
but with actual tape. Remember the
yeah,
reel to reel? And I remember even then. I remember Ian Wiseman was our professor. Unfortunately, I just found out not long ago that he died. Actually, a couple years ago that he died. He died quite a while back, I guess.
yeah,
But I remember him demonstrating editing with uh, audio tape and razor blade and scotch tape.
that's right.
And I remember this moment where I kind of went, "Oh," because he we'd move the reels back. This is ancient technology for the kids listening. We'd have these big reels, and we move the reels, and you'd hear the flow of the conversation. And he would do this edit where he said, "Listen for the intake of breath," and you hear this intake of breath, and then cut it there, cut it here, and then and we'd make it all flow. And I thought, oh, this is something I can get into. This is cool.
It was really cool. And I mean, I think there's probably people listening going, what are they talking about? You actually had to cut this tape.
With razor blades.
I do remember being in those, in the studio doing that. And Ian, who really was one of my favorite teachers at King's, and I was really sad when he passed away. He was so brilliant. It wasn't until later did I realize how brilliant this guy was. Because he would be able to come in and show you all the stuff like it was nothing. Yeah. But really, he was so talented, and we were incredibly lucky. And of course, the students there still are today, because the people who are there now, in fact, Steve Kimber is still there. Stephen Kimber was one of our teachers who's really a respected author and outdoing his book tour right now about the Cuban Five, and I admire him greatly, and he's a supporter of mine and yours. And I think that's the thing when you go there. It's such a unique university and small campus and a wonderful, eclectic group of people that I could not have picked a better university on the planet to go to. And I have sent people to King's, and I honestly think when you stop when you're our age and think about it, it's not till you get a little older do you realize just how special it actually was.
Well, I think there are two things about King's that changed my life, and I still haven't sent them any alumni money, but when I make some, maybe. But but I love the foundation year program. I got so deep into that. For people who don't know, the foundation year program is the history of philosophy and the philosophy of history, and you go right from Gilgamesh forward, and you go into the Bible. And if you go through that program, you know what Diflatermouse is. You wouldn't otherwise know. Because, well,
you're doing like the Republic, you're doing Dante, you're looking about architecture. It gives you a really rounded world history, and it's a lot to take in when you're that age, right? Like we were very young when we took this foundation year program. I mean, it's a lot of really heavy reading over in an intense period of time.
It is, and I still draw on it. There's so much that I got because that was the year that I sucked up information, and the thing is, when you take a survey course like that is a pretty in-depth survey course as these things go, you learn how much you don't know. And many of us, if you go to King's, I think you're from Halifax, right?
I am from Halifax, that's right.
But most of the kids who go there are, they kick the dust from the farm off, or they stop fishing and they go to, in September, they go to King's. There's a lot of people from rural Nova Scotia where you really wouldn't get that information any other way. Even if you're living in the city, you wouldn't get that exposure to that much information that fast. But it's an incredible info dump, and for those who really get into it, that is an amazing year. That would be the year that I would repeat, actually, despite the fact that I had a roommate that I fought with constantly. That would be the year that I would repeat.
Isn't it interesting you say that, Rob? Because I actually have said that to many people that I would really enjoy. As an adult, going back to do that program again. And here's the thing, and people might not know also, is that you're 18 or 19, however old we were, and if you remember this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, at the end of that program, our exam was a verbal exam.
Yeah.
I don't remember. We had to go in front of a board of 2 to 3 professors, and I mean, these people are brilliant, and they're like, as we're doing now, you're sitting there live with these people on panel in front of you, asking you questions about the entire year. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the jokes about first you have to take the orals, and if that doesn't work out, you have to take the supplementary anals. It was for some people, it probably did feel like a colonoscopy, but I really enjoyed it.
Tough.
Sorry?
It was tough. I remember being so intimidated. I mean, I passed. I did all right and everything, but I was. I mean, as much as this is going to sound crazy, I was a very shy public speaker. I've gotten over it, obviously, but for me to go as a kid like that in front of these people, I just remember being absolutely terrified. But
I
I'll
remember
tell you,
being.
it's a sink or swim situation. I would
Mm,
not trade it for anything because this is year one, people. We did a 4-year honors program. We're talking year one. So you are definitely going to weed some people out when you're throwing stuff like that at them.
yeah, I think there are a lot of kids who went through that program who probably had that trial by fire. I remember it being more of a conversation. I found the exams to be quite enjoyable, actually getting into them. But you probably wouldn't get that sort of exposure again until you went to law school, where you're doing like moot court and that kind of thing. It
I
was sort of like
agree. I
that.
mean, it's not typical in a university setting that you would be doing oral exams in front of a board. It's almost like you're going for the job, in the CEO and whoever, so you're being boarded for some job and you're at the second or third round of interviews or something. But again, like what I'm trying to get across to people is this school is just really one of the best in Canada. And again, and just the setting and the environment there. I mean, you know how many late nights we would spend down in the school. I mean, at that time, the journalism school was down underneath in the lower part of Kings. It's not anymore. It's been changed. But we spent so many hours and days and nights down there producing the newspaper, and we'd have to go out and do this story or that story. It became a very close-knit group of people. And I believe when we graduated, I don't think we had more than 12 or 15 people in our class graduating, right?
Um,
It's, it's,
hmm.
it's under 20.
Okay, I would have said 24 or something. I
Yeah,
don't
I don't
don't
know. I'll have
recall.
to go and look. But to me, I was talking to a couple of the other gang the other day about it, and we have put about 12 or 15, but maybe you're right. In the end, you're talking about a handful of people who've come through 4 years together. And, again, you're creating things. It's not like you go sit off and write a 5,000 word paper by yourself. You have to learn to work together as a team to create something. You really get to know people well. And I loved that part of it. I really liked our class and the people who were in it. And I just really to see where everybody is today is wonderful for me. So it's really awesome for me to see you. And actually, you look great. You have it. I'm like just trying to get closer to the screen. You look
Thanks.
fantastic. You do.
Well, it's I had a team of makeup experts in earlier, so and I'm wearing my lipstick. The, well, we went through Kings at a really interesting transitional time because do you remember the first newspaper? It was called the Examiner, I believe. Was that right? Yeah,
Yeah, but
or
then
the
it changed.
Monitor. Was it the Monitor?
The monitor.
Right.
That's
Uh, the first time we went through, they showed us the old way to do it, where you had a machine and it was cut and paste, and it was these long strips of sticky paper for your columns, and
that's right.
and then after that, it was the first desktop published newspaper, uh,
It was.
possibly on Earth.
I think it was. I remember when we got the computer system and everything, and we were just so thrilled by that. I actually do remember that. I remember both. To be honest with you, and this is going to really date me, but I do remember going to a classroom in Kings, and I'm sure of it that there were still typewriters there. So there
Yeah.
wasn't at the very first. I do believe that there were before all the computers, or perhaps during that crossover when they were bringing all the computers in. Is that not right?
I think you're remembering that correctly, although we might be making that up. But I think that's true because it would have been the right time because the computers that must have happened because when the computers came in, I think they were your basic Mac, like the beige hat box thing,
Yeah.
which that was my first computer when I got out of school. I spent $4,000 to get a
Oh,
Mac Plus with an external hard drive and a printer, and it was $4,000 to get that.
oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I moved to Toronto and became a freelancer there, a freelance editor, freelance writer, and that was right before fax machines too. My God, we look fabulous, but we're old.
And you know what? The thing is now, like I'm one of those people with their phone. I have my phone and it's here, and I never go anywhere without my phone. I'm online all the time, and it's like sort of gone from one extreme to the other. I'm one of those techno people or whatever. But I mean, that's why we can talk today, because we have Skype, right? I mean, it's just fantastic, and you have to embrace it. And I think, when you work in our world, I'm still, there's still things I do not, I don't want to say the old-fashioned kind of way, but I still work off a desktop. So I'm talking to you on a laptop. We have two computers in my house, and, we have like the iPad and all the rest of it. But when I go to do my heavy writing, like including the book, I have a desktop, I have a beautiful screen and everything, but I'm sitting at a desk with, that in that sort of feel. I'm not carrying my laptop to a coffee shop or anything like that. And I know many people love to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the reason I bring it up is I'm very intrigued about the process of writing and where people like to write. And I talk to my students at the university like this a lot. And so, for example, I want to show you this. I actually have a candle going. I'll try not to burn the house down as I'm Skyping. But, every time I work in any sort of serious manner at the house, I always light candles. And I travel with them. I don't mean like, please be careful. This is the daughter of a firefighter speaking here. I'm not trying to encourage people to go out and start lighting candles and be in the room with the candle and be careful, right? No small children or anything. But I do always have a lit candle in the room, and I have a view outside. I love the environment, and I love animals and trees and birds and flowers. So what I see in my environment is very important to me when I write. And I often light a fire. I have a fireplace near my desk. In my living room is where I write, and I often, unless it's too warm, light a fire also. So that is a really big part of my creative process for me. I could not go write at a coffee shop because I would be so distracted by everything that I would just sit there and drink my latte and watch everybody.
Janice, did you turn into a hippie chick?
Well, that's what they want. They want to be checking out different characters or what people are wearing or whatever, but that's not what I like to do.
Did you turn into a hippie chick?
No, I told you, lipstick. Glitter, fashion, no, dear. You know me, and I'm still the same.
No, it could be vegan lipstick. You could be going under the radar.
I have no problem wearing vegan lipstick.
All right. Well, I do go to coffee shops to write often, and it's because I don't use the Wi-Fi connection there.
Right.
Because my biggest distraction isn't people in meet space. It's social media.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I know.
Half of my work is marketing and the other half is writing. And my rule is I have to get the writing done first. Because once I write to a certain point, maybe an hour goes by or something, at that point, well, not an hour, probably more like 2 or 3. But as soon as I get to about 2,000 to 3,000 words, I need a break at that point, and I can't really get right back into it again. So I need to do something else. And the something else, if I'm not going to the gym or something, is probably Facebook, Twitter, blogging. I have like 5 or 6 blogs. I forget how many.
I see them.
And 2 podcasts.
I'm telling you, like, honestly, do you sleep at all? How many hours a night do you sleep?
I usually get to bed. Lately, I've been getting to bed earlier, and I'm getting up earlier. So maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a lot because I'm one of those people. I need my 8 hours sleep. I can go on less. In the last few weeks, I certainly have been going on less sleep with the launch and everything, and it's great. But I can't like write really, really late at night. I find after a certain time, I go into sort of night mode and want to put my pajamas on and, watch something on the DVR or talk to my family, or we're at some sporting event because my daughter's a big jock and loves sports. And so I just find in the evening, my mind is not going to write. Now, although I'll say this, last night I had the house to myself and I had my notepad out and I just started getting ideas about other things I want to write. And so I ended up with this whole outline by the end of the night. So I think, it's a really good thing for people to hear, that when you start to let the ideas come, to really go for that, because,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know when they're going to come, and they do come, right? And sometimes it's all of a sudden, it just all falls together. So sometimes people feel like, well, I have writer's block, or I'm struggling. Well, things will hit you when you might not expect it. And to let those come in and go with that. And that happened to me last night, and it was a really exciting time.
Well, as far as workflow goes, I actually find it's kind of ironic. Now that I'm running two businesses instead of one, I actually get a little bit more sleep because I have to fuel the engine.
Yes.
Um, Although I find that even sleeping can be a very creative time because I'm often a lucid dreamer, so I can work. Um, and then for about 60 to 90 seconds a day, I'm literally a genius. I have 60 to 90 seconds per 24-hour period where uh, I get a lot of inspiration for writing. I see a new connection. I see a new pathway to go down. And if you want to learn the trick, or for the listeners, I will show how anyone can be a genius. And here it is. You go to sleep. Don't set an alarm. If you can wake up naturally, that's better. In the space between sleeping and waking is the hypnagogic state. And in that hypnagogic state, your brain is at the most creative it can possibly be. And if you wake up slowly, not to an alarm, and you wake up naturally, and you linger in that time between sleeping and waking, the best thoughts you can possibly have will come to you in the hypnagogic state.
It's really interesting, and also maybe address this too, because I think a lot of your listeners might be thinking, well, if I'm dreaming, right, sometimes you're dreaming as you wake, that the state you're talking about is almost like, people will say, well, I couldn't really tell if it was a dream or if it was reality. So you're almost talking about that state where you could be having, it could be a good dream or a bad dream, but let's just say it's a good one. So you wake up and go, well, geez, I want to go back in there, right? I want to go back to sleep and go back into my dream. We've all had these dreams where something wonderful is happening, and you're thinking, well, it was just so real that you can see people's facial hair, or the colors of their clothing, or the texture, or food, or whatever it is. So I agree with you. I think that state is a really interesting state, and there are many times it's happened to me where I'm going, why did I wake up? I would really like to re-enter that state. So depending on what it is that's in there, it could be big fodder, right?
Well, unfortunately, so many people wake up to
That's true. I
and
hate that.
that's I have always had this thing where if I decide I'm going to wake up, I have a pretty good sense of time. So before I wake up, before I open my eyes and look, I'll guess it is 6:37, and I'll look up. I'll look at the clock, and it'll be 6:35 or 6:38, pretty close. But I don't need the alarm mostly to get up. I do have a terrible time management demands upon me, so I do have backup alarms in case I miss it. But
Do you really?
yeah, because the thing is, when I just took 2 years off just to devote to my imprint, so 16 hours a day was not unusual. That's I actually work a little bit less now. So, and my blogs are
But
suffering after you get back to them.
that's typically your work day then? Are you working 12, 14, 16-hour days?
Yeah, although as a writer, if you're conscious, or in my case, if you're unconscious as well, that really is a distinction without a difference, isn't it? I
That's
mean,
interesting. What an interesting thing to say. That actually, I don't know that I could respond right away with actually not thinking about what you just said, because you're probably right.
it's just we
I think
cannibalize everything, right? Everything goes into the mill.
That's true. I mean, even like all the people you meet, all your experiences, which is like going back to you thinking about writing in the coffee shop. I should try it sometime, really, but I honestly think I just keep staring at the scones and the display and just eat everything in sight. I think I'll stick to my quiet living room setting by the fire with my tea. Are you a coffee drinker? Are you consuming vast amounts of caffeine while you're doing this, or what's the story there?
Typically pots of coffee at home, but if I go to Starbucks, I'll invest in one venti skinny vanilla latte or a grande skinny vanilla latte, and I can nurse that forever. I keep waiting for them to come up and say, you're not renting real estate here. You just bought a cup of coffee.
But everybody does that in Starbucks. I love Starbucks too.
They do. Yeah, they do. They do encourage you to linger, but at some point you think the cost benefit analysis, that like the ratio of this being a benefit to them is that died long after my coffee went cold. So because I'm hanging out a lot.
I can drink a lot of coffee, but I do love tea, and I usually have tea. But then after a certain time of day, I don't need caffeine, Rob. I would be up on the roof, right? I don't really need that. So, but believe me, there's some mornings I do, but generally, after a couple of cups of tea, I'm good, and otherwise, I would probably just be too wound up to think straight.
Well, Janice, we're coming up on turning into pumpkins because we're coming up on an hour, and I know I don't want to screw up your time management. But before we go,
yes,
I wanted to have a little fun with you.
Yes.
Do you remember how we opened the King's Report?
No.
You don't? Oh my God! It was one of
the. Oh, with you? You gotta tell me what to. I mean, I'll do it. I don't care. Are we gonna do King's Report now?
King's Report was our college radio show that Ian Wiseman surprised the heck out of me. He said he was choosing the next hosts of King's Report, and he said Landry and Chute, and I was like, really? I don't think my voice lends itself to radio. But anyway, although with a sore throat, my God, it's
great voice.
It's silk on velvet, baby, today. If I got a sore throat all the time. Actually, the other thing I was going to say about Ian Wiseman, just before we go on about that, is he got me into the Banff Publishing Workshop. When I went to the Banff Publishing Workshop, that was the other thing about Kings that changed my life, was meeting Ian Wiseman, him recommending me to the Banff Publishing Workshop to a guy named Robert McDonald who ran it. And I went out to Banff for the summer to go to the Banff School of Fine Arts for this workshop. And you're there in the mountains for about a month.
So beautiful.
Yeah, I saw an elk on the way to breakfast. It's kind of funny because I said this to somebody last week about how if you live in Banff National Park, you wake up, you look at this beautiful vista, and then the first morning you go, wow, it's the mountain. And then ever after that, because maybe I have ADD, because I just go, yeah, okay, what's next? Yeah, it's a mountain, I get it. Great, it's beautiful, fine, let's went to lunch. Anyway, about King's Report, I remember I really loved doing the opening. Because it always started the same way, and you let me do the opening line, and I always delivered it with the intensity of, the Russians have just launched the missiles. You all have a half an hour to live.
This is fabulous! Oh my God, I love this. So, are you going to do it for me? You have to do it.
What's the date today?
Today, I don't even know what the date is. Where's my? I don't know. I don't even know. Let's just say it's the 14th or 15th. It's somewhere around there.
It's Friday, November 14th, and this is King's Report. I'm Robert Chute.
And I'm Janice Landry.
There you go. I think.
Oh my God! Yeah,
I think you were half.
That is, you have made my week with that. That's the bomb. That's fabulous.
I think your voice was maybe a half octave higher then, by the way.
Definitely lower. I mean, listen, I've been broadcasting for 26 years. It's come down.
Well, you look like 12, you sound like 12. Those were the days.
They were. I cherish them.
Well, this is the funny thing. I was convinced that I had an old tape. I really wanted to find a copy of King's Report so I could play it for you on the podcast. And I went through all these old tapes, like cassette tapes. And as I look back on this now, like I just played a few. I found I still have a machine that can play a cassette tape because I have like hundreds of dollars worth of these tapes and hundreds of dollars worth of vinyl, and it's just sitting there. So I dug out these tapes from the 80s because we went in '83 and got out in '87 because those, we went through boot camp together, and and I wanted to ask you a few questions about 80s music, because when I think of the 80s, I think of the bars downtown in Halifax, because there's a bar in Halifax for every man, woman, and child per capita.
Pretty much.
Our pub
Halifax and St. John's, Newfoundland. Those are the two cities you want to, if you like that sort of thing, go to Halifax or St. John.
That's right. And you'd meet people from all over the world. I remember talking to guys from the U.S. Navy because they were always in. But I remember, what were the names of the bars? Can you remember any?
Well, there's like, now that you're doing this to me, it's awful. Well, Cheers, My Apartment, and Cheers, and all of the Split Crow,
yes,
and on, yes.
And what was the huge one?
Well, I'm trying to think of, there was Rose's Cantina. Do you remember that? That doesn't exist anymore, but do you remember going to Rose's Cantina?
Vaguely.
They used to have like margaritas and stuff like that there. The Peddler's Pub was another one, the Lower Deck.
Right.
They go on and on. I'm trying to think which is
the middle deck too. And the upper deck.
Yeah, the middle deck. Those are all there. But I think I'm trying to think where we would have spent the most time. Probably like in Peddlers and the Split Crow and the Lower Deck and more pubs, because we couldn't really afford to go to some of the other places because things were too expensive. So a lot of the time we would stick to pubs, right?
I think you went to the pubs because you were with the cool kids. I was alone, so I went to what was that? The big one that was like, it took over a Zellers or a Sears. The Paradise or something like that?
I don't remember now.
Oh, there were these huge places that were the size of literally the size of a department store.
You don't mean the Palace?
I do.
Do you mean the Palace?
I went to the Palace. Yeah, I went to the Palace a lot. And you know why?
They've changed that now. They're making it over into a sports bar or something. That's under construction right now. That's probably one of the biggest clubs in the city, right? And they're turning it into a sports club. That was like a late night place. You'd go there. It's late in the morning, and then you're going for your slice of pizza and going home, and it's 4:00 in the morning or whatever. So that was sort of an institution in Halifax for many, many years.
I think the Palace was I think that was actually one of the biggest bars in Canada at one point. That the other thing about it was we were right on the cusp of video, because video was huge when we went to school. It had just came in.
Big time. Are you kidding me? I still videos. Oh, they were everything. Like, you think of now we're gonna start dating ourselves again, but like Duran Duran. All these Rio videos and all, girls on film and all the rest of it. I mean, and people are really into this. What was the one? I think it was in Rio, and the Duran Duran video where they're on the boat. They're on this like beautiful yacht, and then there's the girl posing with all the makeup on and stuff. And you're thinking, I want to be on the yacht with Duran Duran, right? Come on. Who doesn't want to be on that yacht? I still want to go back in time and go on there. Go Google or go to YouTube, folks. Find Duran Duran Rio and just picture myself on that yacht.
Well, I have because I was digging through all these old tapes. I have a few questions for you. So,
oh gosh!
Yeah,
I couldn't even tell you what the bars were in my own city.
That's why this is fun. I'm cruel. Listen to these.
I don't mind. It's all fun. It doesn't matter to me.
Listen to these lyrics and tell me who the artist was and what the song was. 9 lives, short days, long nights, living on the edge, not afraid to die, heartbeat, real strong, but not for long. Better watch your step or you're gonna die. What is that song?
I sort of it's ringing a bell because of the whole living on the edge thing. That's what's coming into my mind. I can hear that, but I don't know. It's the living on the edge thing. It's like that's what stands out, but I can't think of what it is. What is
I'll help you. Da 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 da.
it? Are you trying to give me a nightmare? Water for that waking moment tomorrow when I just see you, listen to you going, and then I visualize that we're at the palace or we're on the boat with Duran Duran, and that's my next book.
The artist is Miss
I don't know
Janet.
what it is. What is it?
It's Miss Janet Jackson.
Oh, Janet Jackson.
And the song was Black Cat.
I don't know that I listened to that song.
It was huge. It was their sixth single on Rhythm Nation.
Really? Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, for sure. It's weird though to hear you say the lyrics, right? Because we're so used to hearing it with the tune that it's kind of neat just to read lyrics out, and some of them are just brilliant, and then some of them are just ridiculous, right? When you go like there's the same line over and over, someone will write the same line over and over and over again, and there's my $75,000 or whatever. Good for you. But
you know what got my attention though? Was I found it on a cassingle. Do you remember cassingles?
No.
A cassette. A cassette.
I mean, like I remember single records where you could buy a little single record, but I don't remember single cassettes.
Yeah, you get a cassingle that's a cassette with one song on it.
Well, I certainly know what a single is. Maybe I'll tell you right now, the people watching this are going to think, what planet are these people? Right? I hope somebody's watching is at least in their 40s. Because otherwise, we have lost everybody else.
It's okay. It's a time machine.
I do have an iPhone, and I do like Starbucks. So it's all good, right?
Okay, I got another question for you. 1986. Do you remember Timbuk 3's hit in 1986?
Timbuk 3. It's probably a one-hit wonder, right?
It is. Top 40 radio success. Broke up in 95. It's top 40 radio success. Broke up in 1995, so they were around for quite a while. And it's an American post-punk band, Timbuk 3.
No, I definitely know who the band is. I definitely recognize that, but I don't. I think it's for me. It would have been considered more of, and it's just my opinion. As we listened to so many songs, and again, because it was video, literally you could make a fortune off one song, right?
Yeah.
And the artist didn't have to have this gigantic repertoire. They could put out a funky video. Think about what's his name? I'll think of it. He used to wear all the chains and all the Billy Idol. Billy Idol, right? Like all these different people that you would just be. It was just who else? Like there's like I loved U2. And U2 was big in the 80s. And I went to see U2 actually on their last tour. They were in Moncton in New Brunswick, and they had that stage, the big gigantic stage that looked almost like an insect, And I mean, it was one of the biggest stages in the world ever constructed.
Right.
And it was the final night of that tour. And I mean, there were 80,000 people at the concert. And U2 has really always been my favorite band. And it started back, in the early 80s. With Sunday, Bloody Sunday, and War, and all of it. I mean, I know all their stuff, but they're probably my favorite band from that era. But I still like them today, and they're still relevant today. So any U2 fans out there, their concert was just amazing.
That's funny. I saw them in Edmonton, and they came out of an egg, and I thought I was a U2 fan, but it turned out that I knew Rattle and Hum deeply, and then I didn't know their other albums so well.
I know a lot of their stuff, but I mean, I could go off of different songs that I love, but I think what's really interesting here is how impactful video really was, and one of the reasons that I loved working in video, and I still do work in video as a producer and writer or director, because videos. I mean, look at YouTube. I talk to my students about this, Rob. What's uploaded online are photographs and videos. Really, you go out and look on Twitter and everywhere else, Instagram and all the rest of it. I mean, people love the visual. They really, really do. And so it's been interesting for me working. That's part of what I do is working in a visual medium, and I loved it. And maybe it's because I grew up in the 80s with all these videos. I don't know.
But why did the music video, that phenomenon, go away so much? As I think, is it just market fragmentation?
I don't know. That's true because to be honest with you, I spend very little time looking at them now. I love music and I listen to music absolutely every day of my life. And there's always different types of music in the house. And my husband plays drums; it's his hobby. And my daughter can play clarinet and piano. So we're a very musical house. But we don't sit around watching music videos. You
No,
know,
but you would have in the 80s.
Oh my! I can remember going to parties at my friends' houses where it was like, here comes that we're waiting for this latest release of the whatever video, like the Cards or the Thompson Twins or whoever. And I mean, it was just the absolute bomb. And what about like Robert Palmer? Do you remember that video that came out, Simply Irresistible, where Robert Palmer was there with the girls with the really bright red lipstick on? Well, Lord, when that came out, people thought that was the hottest thing they'd ever seen.
And a lot of people thought it was the most obscene thing they'd ever seen. And it's not anything.
Now, comparatively to all you have to do is follow politics in Canada, and there's a lot more racy things on that. And, we'll leave that.
I have two more things. I'm going to give you the lightning round, and then we'll be done. Timbuk3, the song that people need to look up on YouTube is "The Future's So Bright, I Gotta Wear Shades."
Yes.
Because everybody loved that, everybody danced to that, and we never heard from Timbuk3 again. Although they didn't break up till '95, so they must have had something going on. And can you name any Howard Jones song?
Oh, yeah. Howard Jones. Yeah. Not as "What Is Love."
Yep.
What is love? That one.
Anyway, yep. And his biggest hit was "I'd Like to Get to Know You Well."
Yeah.
Let's get to know
Am
you
I
well.
right? Did I get one right?
You did.
Yay! And you got to hear me sing. That's gonna go viral, right?
For the bonus, what was his nickname?
Oh, I have no. How do you know this stuff?
I grew up in the 80s.
But I don't know what Howard Jones' nickname is. What is it?
It's actually quite linear. It was Hojo.
Hojo. Well, that makes sense.
We're going to the lightning round, and I'll leave you alone because I'm torturing you just a little bit, but it's awfully fun to torture you. So this is cool. The answers that you're looking for, I'm going to give you a name, and then the next two words are "and the," and you complete it, and it's all musical groups from the 80s.
So say that again. So you're going to give me the name.
Yep, and then the first name in the name of the group, and then the next two words are "and the," and then it's the name of the group.
Okay.
So, and it's all from the 80s. There's just a few. Bruce Hornsby and the
Range.
Good. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the
Fresh Prince.
Right. Doug and the
Slugs, and I'm from the Maritimes, so I know that one.
Edie Brickell and the
New Bohemians.
Oh my God, very good. Grandmaster Flash and the
Oh, and I know this. I don't know, but I could tell you I had some friends that just loved that. I don't remember.
Furious Five.
Okay.
Huey Lewis and the
News.
Joan Jett and the
Blackheart.
Yes, very good. Katrina and the
Waves.
Cool and the
Gang.
Martha and the
I was waiting for this one. Muffins.
Mike and the
Mechanics.
Right. Prince and the
Revolution.
That's right. There's an alternative answer too.
What's the other one? I don't know the other one.
New Power Generation.
No, I think it really... And you know what's so funny is I went to the Prince concert here in Halifax with a bunch of people from Kings, and I sat beside our dear friend Jonna Brewer, who works for CBC in New Brunswick. She is just one of the kindest people, and we danced our butts off to Prince for like 2 hours, and we knew all the stuff. It was so much fun. So there you go. Shout out to Jonna. Sweetheart.
Two more. Susie and the
No, don't know that one.
Banshees.
Ah, right, yes.
But you'll know this one. Tom Petty and the
Heartbreakers.
Yeah.
I did okay, right?
You did really well. You only missed a couple. That's awesome. When I think back to Kings, I remember some really good friends. There were a few, despite some things I've said in the past. There were a few. And I remember the music, as it was such a great decade. And now a lot of people look back on the music, and it's good, but only ironically. Because there was a year there in my second year where it was the new wave, and that was really quite awful. But generally, it was okay.
I think the music was fun. We had a lot of fun, and it was a great era. And I mean, look at the fashion right now. I mean, my daughter's a teenager, and I look at a lot of the colors of the bright neon colors and different things they have that really were huge then too. I mean, some of it, with the gloves and the mesh glove. I didn't get into all that myself, but a lot of it is repeated, and we know that cyclically in fashion and things like that. So it doesn't really surprise me, but it's just really neat.
Yeah, it's there was a show called, I remember there was a movie called Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah.
And it's not a fantastic movie, although it is actually kind of a funny movie. But the one thing I did love about it was it did one thing that time machine movies all do, is they go back in time, and I believe they go back to somewhere in the 80s, which, one of them says, "We've got to get out of here. This is the 80s. This is terrible. It's got AIDS and Ronald Reagan. We've got to get back to our time." But one thing that I loved about it was like everything was typical of the 80s. Like everywhere you looked, everybody had the T-shirt with like prints on it, or they had the leggings, or the sweatbands. Everybody had sweatbands because they're,
Yeah.
let's get physical, and all that nonsense. And it was like, as if everybody went for that same look. The only thing that was consistent about those stereotypes about the 80s was everybody had the same feathered hair.
Listen, look at my hair. I mean, my hair looks really bad right now, but it's small. My hair was huge. I mean, big hair, right? Big hair. It's terrible. I look back now at shots of myself from the 80s and go, what were you thinking, girl?
Well,
anyway, you're right. People embraced it, and I mean, listen, it's hair. It's a top or leggings. It doesn't hurt anybody, so whatever.
Was that all perms or hairspray, or what was that?
Oh, be product for sure. Definitely lots and lots of product.
Well, whoever has the highest hair wins.
That's right. Sharpest, because it would just be like, it'd be like just like some kind of a bucket on top of your head, like plastic at the end of it all, right? It's just so silly.
But at the time,
I do remember this girl, and I can't remember her last name, and I would only hope that she was watching. I remember this girl in foundation year. I thought she was so attractive, and her name was Maria. And I used to sit beside her a lot in the foundation year lectures, and she was very preppy and beautiful, and she always wore this strand of pearls. And I just remember that at our school we had so many different types of styles and groups of people, and I remember just always admiring her for her beauty. So even while the rest of us were doing like the big bucket head and everything else, there were people who had sense out there. So shout out to Maria.
You just gave me a memory of somebody, and I'm not going to say who because it's somebody we both know, but
okay.
Her and her roommate came into the cafeteria. They both had pastel T-shirts on, and they both came in with their little collars turned up.
Yep.
And the whole cafeteria looked at them as they came in and went, "Oh no, 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 no."
You know what? My husband and I joke about the collar thing because he remembers his friends too, and they would like have layers of collars. It wasn't just even, it would be like multiple collars, and they're all standing up, and this was like this big cool thing to do with the collars, So it wasn't just one collars. How many collars can you wear at once?
The trick, nobody knew this. We didn't make a big deal of it, so nobody knew. But Starch wouldn't do it. You'd have to staple it. It was a staple gun thing. Anyway,
staple gunning your collar. I mean, what we do for fashion, Rob. What do we do for fashion in the name of fashion? It's wonderful.
But the thing is, we're looking back at it now and we're laughing because it was so ridiculous. At the time, was it just we were young and stupid, or did we really look that good? I guess if you're young and you can get away with a lot when you're just kind of young and ridiculously confident, even if you have nothing to back it up.
I'll tell you, youth is a great thing, and I'm gonna, I'll bring it around this way to say I'm so lucky today, at this stage of my life, to spend quite a bit of time around young people. And the thing about them is they aren't afraid to dream, and they aren't
Mm.
afraid to push themselves, and they really, really, their energy and, just verve, it's just incredible. And I love being around that. So for this old gal, it sort of takes you back to that time, and it's just so lovely to see them in that. And there's nothing wrong with that. You should enjoy your youth when you have it. I'm sure there'll be lots of young people following along with this podcast. It's a great, great time of your life, and you can see, Rob and I reminiscing, because this really meant a lot to us too. We had a very special time with a great group when we were your age. And when you are, in your, let's say, 18 to 25, go out and have fun. Be careful, be smart, but enjoy it, because it's a really special part of your life. And someday you too will have a podcast and make fun of 2013.
That's unimaginable. Actually, what I envy of when I look at young people, I envy their certainty, because I was very certain then as well. I was very certain of what would happen, and looking back on it now, being certain of the future was absolutely ridiculous.
That's age speaking, right? I mean, now that you can't really be certain of anything. I mean, they always say, death and taxes. I don't want to go there. I think part of the greatness about life is that you don't know. And as
Mm.
long as you're willing to keep learning, right, which you're doing, and which I do, I love learning, and I love just sort of discovering, and sort of allowing yourself to be open enough to follow down that path. And I think that's part of what you do in your writing, is opening yourself up to let those things come in your waking time, or in your quiet time, or coffee shop, or wherever you are, that you allow yourself to follow down the path. Because remember what I said, I was letting fear keep me from following mine, and I didn't let it stop me. And so I'm very grateful for that, because now I know I'm going to write another book. I already have several thoughts in my head, as you can imagine, of what that will be, and it's formulating, and I don't really want to talk about it yet, but I certainly will talk about it with you when the time comes. I do feel that I've sort of gotten past something that was an obstacle for me, and I do feel that my late father has had a big hand in that. So despite the fact that he's not here, I still feel that he's helping me even today.
Well, Janice Landry's book is The 60-Second Story. You have to run out and get it, because it's inspiring, but it'll also give you a good cry. And that's her message. My message is, kids, do lots of drugs, have the best sex of your life, and thanks for listening to the Cool People Podcast. Janice, you have been on the Cool People Podcast. You know what that means.
No.
You're cool.
Thank you for underlining that fact. Thank you so much, Rob. And I have to tell you, I'm absolutely honored that you would have me on the podcast. More so than anything, it's just so nice to see your face and know that you still have that. You have a wonderful sense of humor. You've always had it, and you've always been a nice guy. Will you do me one favor? Will
What?
you take us out by doing the little line from the show from back in Kings? Just give me that line one more time, and I'll be happy. I mean, honest to God, I love that. One more time for me.
It's Friday, November 14th, and this is King's Report. I am Robert Chazz Chute, and
I'm Janice Landry, and thank you for watching.